Hi everyone, this is Srishti Gupta and I've made a short video on probability, especially for grade 2 students. So let's get started. Probability in its literal sense is basically a measure of the likeliness that an event will occur or not occur. So when I talk about probability, I'm actually talking about chances that something might occur. It does not tell for sure that it might occur or not, but it tells that what are the chances that something will occur. So, for example, you're going out and you look at the weather and you might say that I'd better take an umbrella today. It's probably going to rain. Or you come back home just after a math test and your parents ask you, how did it go? And you'll say, I'll probably pass in the test. It didn't go that bad. Or you are sitting in the class and you see that your friend's entering late again and you go, she's late again. The teacher will probably scold her today. So all these things basically give or convey the idea of probability, and it shows that probability is not something that is to be studied only in the classroom, but something that affects us very closely in our day-to-day life. Now, probability of an event can be described in terms of a probability line. And when I say probability of an event, by event I mean what what is that thing that for which we are calculating the probability? What is that thing for which we are calculating the chances that it may happen or not? So if I'm asking you that what is the probability that it is going to rain tomorrow? So in that case, the event is that will it rain tomorrow? All right. So that is what event means here. So probability can be represented in terms of a probability line as I've shown here, and probability will always take a value between 0 and 1. So it can never be less than 0 and it can never be more than 1. So that is something that you need to keep in mind. Alright, so I've shown a probability line over here and we can see that it starts from 0 and it ends at 1. And in between, obviously, it can take values between 0 and 1. So maybe over here you have somewhere 1 by 4. I've already marked half. You can have 3 by 4 here and so on and so forth. Alright, okay. So when I talk about 0, when I say that probability of something, probability of some event is 0, it means that that event is impossible. That means that thing cannot happen. So if I ask you that what is the probability that you sprout wings and start flying today? So you're going to say that's absurd and that's impossible, and therefore the probability is 0. All right, so that is a 0 probability or an impossible event. On the other side, we have 1. So that 1 means certain event, something that is for sure going to happen. So unless you're living in countries like Norway where the sun doesn't really set and rise every day. So unless you're living there and I ask you a question that what is the probability that sun is going to rise tomorrow? And you're going to say, of course it is going to rise. So the probability is equal to 1. So it is a sure or a certain event. In between, you can have different values between 0 and 1, but at right in the center, I have equally likely events who have a probability of half. That means something which is equally likely to happen or not to happen. So if I toss a coin and I ask you what is the probability that you get a heads, and you're going to say there's a 50-50 chance. I might get a head, I might get a tail. There are two things and one of them is going to happen. So that is something which is equally likely. So it's an equally likely event. Getting a heads on a toss of a coin is an equally likely event because it has a probability of half. And in between 0 and half, you have something which is less likely. That means these are slightly less likely to happen because they have a probability less than half. Whereas events who have a probability greater than half are more likely to happen. So these are more likely events. And we're just going to have to look at examples for these to understand them a little better. All right. So we start with an impossible event, and the first example I have for you here is that what is the probability of getting a 7 when you roll a normal dice? So when I say normal, I mean that it has 6 faces, and each of these faces has these number marked. That means from 1 to 6 we have 6 faces, and 1 to 6 you have the numbers marked on them. All right. Okay. So I ask you what is the probability that you get a 7, and the probability is 0 because you will never get a 7 over here because there is no 7 on any of the faces, and therefore this is an impossible event. I have another example here. You have a jar of blue and red balls. So you have some red balls, you have some blue balls, and I ask you that what is the probability that you take out a black ball from this jar? and that is again 0 because you cannot take out a black ball from a jar which has blue and red balls, and therefore this is an impossible event. The next one is an equally likely event. An example for this, as I discussed before, is probability of getting a heads or probability of getting a tail when you toss a fair coin. So if you toss a coin, there are two options. Either you get a head or you get a tail, and since both of them are equally likely to happen, therefore these are equally likely events. That means the probability for the heads and for the tail both is equal to half. Alright. And another thing that I want to bring to your attention here is, what do I mean by a fair coin? And this is something that you're going to encounter quite often when you're talking about probability questions. So when I say a fair coin or I say a fair dice, what I mean is that that dice or that coin is not biased towards a particular outcome, and it is equally likely that any of the outcomes can happen. So in case of a coin, it is equally likely that you get a heads or tail. In case of a dice, it is equally likely that you get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, so any of the 6 numbers. So it is basically not biased. The next one is basically a less likely event. So this particular event has a probability between 0 and half. So it is not exactly equal to 0 or not exactly equal to half, but something that is between 0 and half. And when I talk about a less likely event, it is something which is not very likely to happen, but it is not also something that is not going to happen for sure. Alright? Okay. So the first example is that what is the probability of getting a 4 when you roll a normal dice? So when you roll a normal dice, you can either get a 1, you can get a 2, you can get 3, you can get 4, you can get 5, or you can get 6. So these are the 6 possible outcomes. And out of this, I'm saying that what is the probability that you get a 4? So I'm just asking you about one number. So obviously the probability or the chances are less because you might get 1, you might get 2, you get 3, you get 5, or you get 6. But getting 4, chances are less because I'm just talking about one single number over here. Alright, so just getting this one particular number when you throw a dice is less likely to happen. The next example that we have here is that I have a bag of green, that is 5 green, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 green, and 4 blue balls, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 orange balls. Alright, and I ask you that what is the probability that I find that I take out an orange ball. Now the number of orange balls are just 3, whereas there are 4 blue balls and there are 5 green balls. So obviously there are chances that when you take out a ball, it is likely that it might not be orange and that it is maybe green or blue. So taking out an orange ball from a bag which has just 3 orange balls is a less likely event. Another thing that you must remember is that when I say that something is less likely, I do not mean that it will not happen at all. When you roll a die, it might happen that you get a 4. When you pick out a ball out of this particular bag, it might happen that it's an orange ball. What I'm saying is that it is only less likely and something not impossible. Next, we come to a certain event. So, certain event has a probability which is equal to 1, something which is going to happen for sure. The first example I have here is getting a number between 1 and 6 inclusive when you roll a die. So what I am trying to say is that what is the probability that when you roll a die, you get a number which is 1 or maybe 2 or maybe 3, 4, 5 or 6. Essentially, I'm saying you get any number that has been printed on those faces of the dice. And you say, well, obviously I am either going to get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. So therefore, this is a certain event that you get one of these number when you roll a dice. The next example is taking out a green ball from a bag of green balls. Now the bag has only green balls, and when you're going to take out a ball, that is obviously going to be green. So obviously the event here is a certain event and its probability is equal to 1. The last one is a more likely event, and this one has a probability between half and 1. So probability is greater than half, but it is not equal to 1. So you are not 100% sure that this is going to happen. But since the probability is greater than half, it is quite likely to happen. Alright. So example here is that what is the probability that you get a number which is greater than or equal to 2 when you roll a die. So you can get anything between 2 to 6, and that's quite likely to happen. Alright. The next one is that from the same bag of 5 green, 4 blue and 3 orange balls, what is the probability that you take out a green ball? Since most of the balls are green, there is a very high chance that you take out a green ball. So it's a more likely event. I hope you found this useful and thank you so much for watching.